Party Popper, thank you so much for subscribing. Your presence here isn't just another number. It's a sign that stories still matter, that truth, emotion, and the courage to feel still have a place in this world. Speech Balloon, if you're new, welcome truly. You've just stepped into more than a channel. This is a safe space for hidden truth, quiet heartbreaks, and endings that don't always wrap up neatly, but always leave a mark. Backhand index pointing right, still watching without subscribing? Please don't just pass by. This is your moment to say, yes, I want to feel something real again. Click subscribe, not just for us but for you. Because what comes next will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Bell and tap the bell, because the next story might just echo something in your own life, and you deserve to be the first to hear it. Right arrow, one click. One emotional journey. One chance to be part of something that dares to be raw, honest, and unforgettable. We're waiting for you. The atmosphere in the motel was heavy with the musty odor of mildew, mingling with the lingering traces of fast food. A humble bar of soap sits quietly in the bathroom. A cigarette burn blemished the bedspread. A lone lamp in the corner emits a gentle hum, its subtle buzz permeating the stillness. I discovered that I was already nestled between them, one trailing, one leading. With my back pressed firmly against his chest, the other man's hand settled at my hips. Their skin glowed with a gentle warmth. My body shook with an uncontrollable tremor. The air conditioning unit had stopped working. It's possible that I was. One of them pressed their lips against mine with an intensity that conveyed a palpable urgency in every caress. The other gripped my waist more firmly. Yet I stayed motionless, not due to a lack of yearning but rather an incapacity to achieve it. I had already ventured too deep, I remarked. Only if you take turns, and truly they had. It barely felt like a wrongdoing. It felt like I was yielding to a longing I had suppressed for far too long. I was completely sober. I made my choice freely. I was present. A sense of longing enveloped me. That's the element I struggled to express clearly. Not for my own benefit, to no one at all. I have reached the age of 39 years. Recently navigated the complexities of a divorce, experiencing a profound sense of disconnection. 15 months had slipped by since I last felt a touch that radiated warmth instead of pity. I comforted myself with the thought that I was making progress. I just needed a little time. Still, healing transforms into a soft murmur. Loneliness seeps in quietly. In that instant, two souls looked upon me not as a conundrum to be solved, but as a flame beckoning them to come closer. Curiosity calls you to unveil the identities of James and Mason. Brotherly connections, not by blood. Brothers forged by choice, who never fully let go of each other after stepping into adulthood. They were helping me with the renovation of the cabin I obtained from the divorce. Infinite stretches of time. Jeans adorned with a delicate veil of dust, fingers marked by vibrant hues of paint. Quiet strength. James was the older of the two, tranquil, perceptive. Mason kept up his playful banter until he finally stopped. They made their appearance each day for a duration of 2 weeks. Looked upon me as though I were genuinely human. Still united in marriage, powerful and unwavering. Not forsaken. Just me. The storm unveiled the motel, its silhouette emerging through the tempestuous haze. A fierce thunderstorm unleashed its fury on the night after we had removed the drywall. The pathways returning to town lay drowned beneath a veil of water. James suggested we take our time at the quaint roadside motel just down the way. He brought it up nonchalantly, as though it lacked any semblance of ammunition. I was conscious of it. Indeed, I responded without a doubt. Nonetheless, I collected a modest bag. Yet I found myself climbing into their truck, my heart racing as if I were 16 again. Within the confines of the room lay 2 beds, but it is the memory of only one that lingers vividly in my mind. At first, it resonated with joy and laughter, footwear drenched in moisture. Mason expresses his frustrations regarding the flickering light. A hush settled over the area, exuding a soothing warmth, distinctive, dangerous. James extended a towel to me, his fingers brushed softly against mine. I found myself lost in his gaze, unable to look away for what felt like an eternity. Mason, still barefoot, lounged on the mattress and observed, "This night is already peculiar. It seems only fitting that we share our thoughts candidly." My eyes were drawn to him, then at James. I spoke those words. "The origin eludes my understanding. Responsibility must be shared, or it cannot be embraced." The silence that followed was fleeting. As James approached, Mason lifted himself into a seated position. The recollection of the hands that first caressed me slips through my fingers. It was nothing but the quaking that enveloped me. They both made a mental note. Someone pressed their lips against my collarbone. The other lifted my shirt, as though performing a sacred rite. My breath came in sharp, quick gasps. My legs parted instinctively. The air was thick with silence. Just movement. Just take a breath. Flesh moving seamlessly against flesh. Fingers gliding over ribs. The bed let out a gentle creak as the weight shifted. A quiet echo of the intimacy shared in that moment. It was quite simple. It bore no trace of romance whatsoever. The urgency hung in the air, thick and undeniable. It seemed that the three of us were holding on to something broken, uncertain of how to carry its burden by ourselves any longer. The warmth of James's chest against my back remains etched in my memory. The coarse timbre of Mason's voice resonated as he groaned against my neck. Their hands, a constant presence, never colliding but instead enveloping me with steadfast encouragement. One extended a hand, while the other watched intently, and I permitted it to unfold, simply because I wished to. Out of necessity, I was not crying. Nevertheless, I had the capacity to do so. It was devoid of any hint of grime. It felt as though someone genuinely saw me for who I am. The yearning was so deep it cut through to the very essence of being. The second bed lay undisturbed. We never explored its significance. Only intertwined limbs, whispered breaths, and the lingering scent of sweat in the night air. In the midst of the turmoil, a fragment of my being broke apart, laid bare. What steps would you consider if the one person who brought you a sense of wholeness was the same individual you were cautioned to steer clear of? What if there existed a pair of them? What if, rather than breaking you apart, their touch brought forth the very essence of your being? I am left pondering what this truly means for me. I feel a sense of uncertainty about the story I'm crafting right now. Still, I am convinced that that evening in the motel bore no burden of guilt. It was as essential as the very air that fills our lungs. It may be that this is the facet I struggle to forgive the most. If you have ever reached out for something, fully conscious of the havoc it might wreak, all in pursuit of a genuine sense of existence, then this story may prove to be a challenging one for you. Demonstrate your support by clicking that subscribe button. Some truths murmur gently, but their existence cannot be ignored. In the week that ensued after our stay at the motel, I remained mute, refraining from speaking to either of them. A message from James appeared on my screen, and I found myself captivated, gazing at it for what felt like hours before ultimately choosing to dismiss the notification. Mason's silence pierced through the air, a sharp ache that words could never replicate. I persuaded myself it was nothing more than a mistake, a byproduct of the storm, the subpar vodka, a reflection of my isolation and mental turmoil. However, none of it contained any veracity. No, not in the slightest. I had longed for them. I persisted in that endeavor. The cabin stood as a symbol of my fresh start. Nestled on a tranquil slope at the edge of Pine Hollow, just 30 minutes from the nearest town, it was embraced by trees that protected it from the outside world. I acquired it using the leftover settlement funds. At first, there existed a complete absence of running water. Shattered planks of the porch, the interior walls that demanded a thorough renovation. I felt a sense of detachment. The stillness was what I longed for. I longed for a possession that was entirely my own. The company occupied none of my thoughts. It was in the hardware store that I first encountered James, Upon hearing my question about patching drywall, he kindly offered his assistance. 2 days later, Mason showed up, a ladder in hand and a wide smile lighting up his face. They embodied kindness, competence, and an invigorating simplicity. My thoughts aligned with that sentiment. However, kindness can possess a certain edge when one has been deprived of a gentle touch for over a year. Especially when such generosity is extended by hands that can elevate you with the same ease as a mere box of nails, and eyes that look at you as though you are not broken, but rather ready for renewal. My marriage ended with a soft sigh. There shall be no tolerance for cheating whatsoever. Silence, please. 2 individuals slowly drifting away from the tenderness they once shared. He stopped asking about my well-being. I stopped expecting him to notice my decision not to eat. We ceased our communication, wrapped in a shroud of silence, each of us opting for the unspoken word. The final breaking point proved to be trivial. On that ordinary Tuesday morning, I watched him leave for work, and in that instant I realized my apathy regarding his return. In the wake of the divorce, the well-worn refrain of remarks reverberated through my surroundings. Time has a way of mending wounds. Focus on your unique path. Within you lies a strength that surpasses your own understanding. However, it is rarely acknowledged that the path to healing can frequently seem rather ordinary. The days unfold, laden with the repetitive rhythm of laundry and an overwhelming sense of isolation. Drifting into slumber, the television casting a warm glow, a simple remedy against the silence that wraps around your home. There are times when the longing for desire becomes so intense that you'd willingly exchange anything for just a moment of it, however brief it may be, even if it ultimately leads to your unraveling. The morning after my time at the motel, I sat on the front porch of the cabin, cradling a mug of coffee while I looked out at the woods. The stillness wrapped around the environment, unbearably quiet. Anticipation coursed through me as I awaited the familiar sound of tires crunching on gravel, heralding the arrival of one of them. To behave as though nothing has happened, seek information regarding the next phase of the renovation. Still there was nothing. Just silence. Only I. That void echoed with a depth unmatched by anything else. By Friday I had reached my breaking point. I made my way into town. I meandered into the hardware store, in search of a hint of humanity, and there he stood, a figure etched against the backdrop of the world. James Jammin. He glimpsed me, exhibited an unwavering resolve. No smile graced the face. He simply offered a nonchalant greeting. Hey! Then he moved closer, as if we were still the same individuals we had been in the past. However, we found ourselves not in that position. I thought we would finish the trim this week, he said. I had thought you had thrown in the towel. I was not aware of your wishes. As I looked down at my hands, a wave of reflection enveloped me. Roughened knuckles, chipped and dulled nail polish. I too was in the dark. He offered a subtle nod, spoke not a single word. Following a brief moment of reflection, Mason too has succumbed to silence. I offered a discreet nod. It seems we may have broken something beyond repair. James's voice stayed low and subdued. It appears we have encountered something quite fascinating. As I journeyed home that evening, the crisp breeze wafted through my open windows. The wind caressed my face, and in that instant, I felt the warm tears cascading down my cheeks. Not crying, simply allowing tears to fall. After months of solitude, a pair of eyes met mine unflinching, accepting the transformation I had undergone. After a span of 2 days, they made their return. Both of them. Upon my porch I stand as though the storm had never taken place. With a steady hand, James clutched the drill, his fingers wrapping around its handle with purpose. Mason made his entrance, a bag brimming with screws in one hand and a box of donuts in the other. Back to work, Mason said, raising an eyebrow. I offered a subtle nod. Still my hands quivered, for I came to understand that we were no longer just rebuilding the cabin. A fresh chapter was unfolding. A concept lingered in my mind, elusive and beyond my grasp of language. That afternoon, we labored as though the world surrounding us had remained unscathed by the events that had unfolded. Baseboards laid bare. Measured the new paneling meticulously. We exchanged a chuckle about the malfunctioning outlet in the back room. Still, every time they passed, I found myself unable to suppress a flinch. Not from fear, but from the profound recesses of memory. When Mason's arm brushed against mine, a sudden hitch caught in my breath. James's voice reverberated from behind me, stirring a knot of unease in my stomach. Thus it commenced once more. James leaned in ever so slightly as he illustrated the proper way to grip the level. Mason handed me a rag, his fingers lingering against mine for a moment that felt just a heartbeat too long. The air thickened once again, searing, substantial. Yet silence held dominion, for we were all cognizant of the events that had transpired. We found ourselves uncertain about how to proceed. That evening I sat on the floor of the unfinished bedroom, my eyes locked onto the wall. A dull ache pulsed through my hands. My chest throbbed with a growing intensity, for I realized that this was merely the beginning of a much larger journey. I discovered that I was ill-equipped to bring it to a stop. For the next 3 weeks, they showed up each day without exception. James makes his entrance in the morning, ever the embodiment of punctuality and steadiness. Mason made his entrance later in the day, usually post-lunch, perpetually equipped with a tale of truck troubles. A call from his cousin stirred a forgotten errand, lingering like a shadow in the recesses of his mind. Nevertheless, I grasped the cause of his hesitation. He appeared hesitant to find himself alone in my company. Not at this time. James upheld his poise and professionalism. Still, I felt the pause in his movement, his fingers grazing against mine as he handed me the tools. Mason turned his eyes away at first, until he stopped doing so. One afternoon, I stepped into the kitchen to find Mason nonchalantly leaning against the counter. His forearms were adorned with the traces of paint. Unclad, bare to the elements, I swung the fridge door wide open. I pretended not to notice his eyes fixed on me. He noted, "You tend to go quiet when something's in the works." I transitioned slowly. "What do you think is coming into focus?" He chose to remain silent, gave a fleeting nostalgic smile. I exited the room. Still, I was convinced he had felt it too. We then shifted our focus to the bathroom, a compact area, a modest expanse, suitable for a pair of individuals. James knelt by the sink, meticulously installing the new vanity. I deftly navigated around him to grasp the drill. Without a moment's hesitation, he reached out and seized my wrist. Held it tightly, just for a fleeting instant. He whispered, "Don't think I haven't been trying to erase that night from my memory." A fleeting glance was cast over his shoulder. Yet I discover that I am unable to accomplish this. I was unable to do so as well. I felt no inclination for a return. A lingering feeling settled in, one that whispered of an inner transformation I could not ignore. There was a challenge in expressing this clearly. It is not love, not a longing, something completely different. A hint of recognition. It felt as though we had crossed an invisible threshold, one that could never be undone. They approached with a newfound caution. Engage only when it is truly necessary. There were no lingering gazes shared between them, no words that could resonate in return. And still the silence lingers. The stillness conveyed a profound message. In the quiet embrace of a late night, I discovered myself sitting solitary in the living room. The television remains mute. The flickering light waltzes gracefully across the walls. The drywall stands in an unfinished state. Cans of paint rest silently in the corner. The atmosphere was heavy with the fragrance of plaster, intertwined with the crisp scent of pine. Out of the blue, a knock echoed through the silence. Soft. Via the back entrance. "James Jammin." He stepped inside, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that held me captive. "I seem to have forgotten my tape measure," he noted. I offered a subtle nod. Let him continue. As he stepped back outside, he lingered at the threshold, a moment of hesitation gripping him. "How are you managing these days?" I hesitated for just a heartbeat too long. Then they spoke. "I find myself in a state of uncertainty now." He offered a subtle nod. No pressure was applied. That one sentence sparked a fire within once more. Mason was a figure of striking difference. He kept his distance throughout the day. Yet, when our paths converged beneath the shroud of night, echoing that instant we both reached for the same box of nails in the truck bed, he drew back. "Do you find yourself feeling a touch of fear towards me at this moment?" I asked with a playful touch. His gaze held on to me for an unnerving stretch of time. "No," he said, his voice firm. "Your presence leaves me with a sense of unease." One evening, I graciously extended an invitation for dinner. A simple pleasure. Succulent grilled chicken, fresh sweet corn, and a refreshing beer. I set 3 plates. We enjoyed our meal on the porch, accompanied by the serenade of cicadas, the air thick with humidity and a palpable tension lingering around us. Mason reflected on a band from his past, a group he once shared the stage with. James mostly took in the conversation. However, I observed the way their eyes flickered in my direction. Constantly watching, constantly holding back a part of oneself. Afterward, Mason offered his assistance with the dishes. Just the two of us in the small, cluttered kitchen. I offered him a glass. His fingers brushed against mine, extending the moment just a heartbeat too long. Then he allowed his hand to drop. Fast stepped back. "Your presence adds layers of complexity to the quest for virtue." I opted to remain silent, because I desired him not to be good. Not anymore. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a feeling that enveloped everything around. The sound of their boots resonated through the stairwell. As they glided by me, uncomfortably close to being overlooked, overly careful to steer clear of criticism, the moment my breath hitched in my throat, as one of them whispered my name gently, it felt like a treasured recollection lingering in the air. Then came the moment with the stove. In that kitchen, James and I discovered our true selves. As I stood there, I discovered myself enveloped in the ritual of brewing a cup of coffee. He reached out his hand toward the overhead cabinet. We turned in perfect harmony. In a heartbeat, I discovered myself trapped between the counter and his chest. It is rather straightforward. Non-confrontational. Merely silence. His breath whispered against my cheek. His hand lightly grazed mine. We held our ground motionless, not for a complete 10 seconds. In those brief moments, recollections of the motel flooded my mind, engulfing my senses. The oppressive warmth, the overwhelming sense of urgency. I implored them with the urgency of one struggling for breath, filled with desperation and a sense of being adrift. James swallowed hard, a tightness coiling in his throat, spoke not a single word. Then he recoiled as though the very ground of Jameseth were set aflame. That night, sleep slipped through my fingers like sand, for I arrived at a profound realization that enveloped me in a fear more intense than guilt itself. I longed for it again, transcending the material, the closeness, the profound experience of genuine understanding, of being enveloped, of great importance to each of them. That evening I stood by the window, my eyes fixed on the truck that sat quietly in the driveway. Both found themselves enveloped in it, heads lowered. Silence reigned supreme, simply positioned, as though they were holding on to an unexpressed connection, a fragile thread neither wished to break. On a Sunday evening it shattered. There are no instruments, no tasks remain to be completed. Just the three of us huddled in the cabin, the rain drumming on the roof as if it longed to burst in. Mason strode in, a bottle of bourbon clasped firmly in his hand. He asserted his fatigue with pretending that we didn't all yearn for a drink. We filled the diverse collection of mugs with it. Seated cross-legged on the couch, I discovered a fleeting moment of tranquility. James settled back into the well-loved armchair. Mason reclined on the floor, one arm casually resting over the coffee table, his eyes wandering into the emptiness. The silence stretched on, filling the air with an unsettling weight. Then I began to speak. It is imperative that we transcend this cycle of incessant repetition. James directed his gaze toward me. Tranquil. Stillness. Mason turned his eyes away completely, softly murmured, "Certainly. I comprehend." I sprang to my feet, entered the kitchen. Necessary space, air, or any other element. I pressed my hands against the icy edge of the sink, grappling for my breath. In an instant, I sensed the sound of footsteps drawing near. The atmosphere in the room felt as though it were tightening its grip around me. James, Mason, both, the stillness wrapped around them, untouched by even a whisper, did not touch me at all. They remained motionless, as though waiting for the next step I would take. Had I run, or shift direction, or plunge downwards? Then I pivoted. James was the first to extend his hand toward me. His hand moved softly across the curve of my face, not quick, gentle, in a straightforward manner. Indeed, Mason lingered just behind me, his warmth penetrating my shirt, a tangible presence that sent a delightful shiver racing down my spine. "This exceeds my abilities," I murmured softly, my voice trailing off. James's voice resonated with a soft, muted quality. "That is not something we are asking of you," Mason commented. "Only if you truly wish for it." He seemed to be consumed by fear. I did too. Still, I maintained that I must. This time, the initial kiss possessed an extraordinary essence. A motel bed is absent, no storm to bear responsibility for. A straightforward choice. An exquisitely flawed, chaotic decision. James pressed his lips to mine, each moment stretching out with a purposeful slowness. His lips possessed a gentle softness. Yet, there exists a sense of certainty. Mason's hands rested gently on my hips, as though he were anchoring me solidly in that instant. My shirt danced in the breeze. For a fleeting moment, my breath caught in my throat. Thereafter, they swapped their roles. Mason's lips met mine with an intensity that ignited a spark between us. James's lips grazed my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. Two sets of hands, rough yet tender, glide gracefully in harmonious unison. I reached my hand back, extending it into the unknown, unveiled the silhouette of Mason's waist. He was drawn nearer. He emitted a soft groan close to my ear. We moved to the living room floor. The rug pricked at my knees. The bourbon sat forsaken, a remnant of days gone by. James nestled himself behind me. Mason lay back in front of me, bare-chested, his eyes locked onto mine. Once again, I found myself ensnared in the chasm that lay between them. In that instant, the veneer fell away, revealing a profound sense of authenticity that took center stage. My garments were discarded piece by piece, engaging each button with deliberate intent. My breath grows ever more shallow. Mason tugged at my shirt, deftly pulling it over my head. James encircled my waist with his hands, holding me firmly in place. Our skin met in a fleeting touch. Their bodies drew closer, enveloped in warmth. At that moment, I let go of my hold. Mason's lips met my chest with a gentle press. James brushed his lips softly against my shoulder. One of them whispered my name gently. I find myself unable to remember which one it was. A vivid memory lingers, one of a deep awareness of being truly seen. The manner in which it was conducted, it transcended simple warmth. It was genuinely extraordinary. As though they were determined to thwart my disappearance, we proceeded with the understanding that it was merely a transient instance, as though it were the last treasure we would ever encounter. Mason's fingers danced through my hair while I let out a soft sigh against his lips. With every shift, James's hold on my hips tightened, a palpable intensity building between us. My back arched with elegance. My body quivered. Amidst the rhythm of it all, the rise and fall, the way they extended and retracted, then extended again, I felt my thoughts slipping into the background. Forgotten entirely. Stopped hurting. It bore no trace of tenderness. Fell short of perfection. It was without a doubt real, disorderly, echoing. The lamp fell over, the mug tipped precariously, its contents cascading out in a chaotic spill. I released a cry too powerful to hold back, and bit my lip to suppress the noise. James's lips brushed against my back. Mason's lips met my chest, a gentle yet intimate gesture. With a profound sense of sorrow, I concealed my face within my hands. I broke apart in their arms, and they held me there. In the aftermath, we discovered ourselves intertwined upon the floor. The sole sound that fills the room is the rhythm of our breathing. Mason delicately wove his fingers through my hair. James's hand hovered just above my ribs. The room was shrouded in silence. Every word had dissolved into a hushed stillness. Yet I was anything but empty. This time the answer is a firm no. I am perplexed by its significance, or what the cost will be. In that moment I felt an overwhelming sense of wholeness, not confirmed yet noted. I find myself questioning if I will withstand the consequences that follow. Still, I would welcome the experience again, each moment of desperation, completely fragmented. For 3 long days they vanished without a trace. The cabin lay shrouded in an eerie stillness, neither the sound of hammering nor the whir of drilling. The gravel lies in silence, untouched by the passage of feet. The wind softly murmurs through the pine trees, as my thoughts wander along the walls. The bulk of my hours were devoted to the kitchen, refraining from nourishment, remaining motionless, simply taking in the symphony of sounds that envelop me. As the heavy rumble of a passing truck echoed through the air, I instinctively held my breath. With every new message, a tight knot twisted in my stomach. However, it was never genuinely them. On the 4th day, Mason finally made his entrance. Not at the threshold, not through the use of tools, just next to the truck. I caught a fleeting glimpse of him through the window. His hands were tucked into his pockets, shoulders sagged. I flung the door wide, but a moment's pause held me back from stepping through. He raised his eyes, looked deep into my eyes. Then they turned their eyes away. "I shouldn't have come," he murmured. I chose to remain silent. He started to turn back toward the truck. Then it came to a stop. "It lingers in my thoughts," he murmured. Still I chose to hold my tongue. With that, he raced off into the horizon. James made his entrance the next morning. Knocked twice upon the door. Stopped. This time I turned the knob and stepped through the doorway. He seemed fatigued, serene and collected. "The air is not chilly. Merely worn and aged. I have no regrets," he declared. Not even a moment. I lowered my eyes, examining the ground beneath James's. Nevertheless, yet I find myself uncertain about the path that lies ahead. I shifted to the side. Grant him access. He stood firmly at the threshold. Did not touch me at all. She didn't even bother to take a seat. A change has been duly noted and communicated. All 3 of us united in this moment. There is no turning back now. He took his leave then. The days blended seamlessly into one another. I moved gracefully through the rooms, an ethereal figure in the quietude, gently touched the walls we had built together. I traced my fingers over the precisely crafted wood trim. In every mark, in each surface, their presence echoed within me. Their hands, their breath lingered in the crisp air. Their mass, I endeavored to press forward, strive to finish the painting, strive to discover solace. Still, each object I came across evoked thoughts of them. The house was now engulfed by their presence, and lacking in my presence. One fateful night, I ventured to the gas station nestled in the heart of town. To truly embrace the essence of humanity, to discover one's essence within the radiance of fluorescent lights and the gentle murmur of everyday dialogue. As I stood in line, I grasped a candy bar that offered me no allure whatsoever. In that instant I perceived the sound. Mason's voice floated softly, a gentle murmur that lingered just behind me, low and quiet. "You appear fatigued," he observed. I turned with careful deliberation. He slipped into the familiar black hoodie, The very one he wore that night at the motel. He seemed as if sleep had completely slipped through his fingers. I admitted that I often grapple with the elusive embrace of sleep. He offered a subtle nod. I discovered that I was not the only one experiencing this. After that, we fell into silence. We paused in the aisle, two spirits ensnared in the wake of an irrevocable decision. That night, I lay in bed, my eyes drawn to the ceiling overhead. The shadows thrown by the trees waltzed like specters across the walls. And I whispered, "What have we turned into?" Still silence hung in the air, unaddressed. As I had not been asking them, I found myself deep in thought. On a Monday they made their return, in harmony, as though they had arrived at a decision while I was not there. James strolled toward the porch. Mason carried a toolbox, each step imbued with intent. They stepped inside unannounced. A smile was nowhere to be seen. I stepped out into the world beyond my door. Stood there, brimming with anticipation. James stated, "We would like to finish the work if you would permit us." Mason stated, "We'll uphold a clean approach." In that moment, a small piece of my heart broke at his words. For I had lost all yearning for tidiness. Still I nodded. Comprehended. From that moment forward they proceeded with care. James kept his distance. Mason held his tongue. We labored in close proximity, just inches away, yet never bridging the gap between us. Yet in every silence a scream reverberated. Every glance stirred a deep yearning. One evening, I stepped into the living room and found Mason absorbed in the sight of the newly painted wall. "Are you okay?" I asked. He turned sharply. His eyes shimmered with a fierce crimson light. "No," he responded. "I feel as though I have sullied something that once saved me." Words eluded me, leaving me in a state of silence. I share that sentiment deeply. James was a man of few words, his silence often speaking volumes. However, when it ultimately descended, it bore a significant impact. We found ourselves deep in the process of installing shelves. Cradling the level in one hand, he fixed his gaze on the wall with unwavering focus. He then remarked that you shouldn't have to carry the burden alone. I chose not to ask about his intent. I was already cognizant. We finished the cabin in silence. The paint has set. Strings of lights were gracefully arranged. At last the dust has settled, yet within me chaos reigned supreme. Truly it had come undone. On certain nights I found myself pondering the notion of connecting with them through a text message. I just wanted to convey the depth of my longing for them. This night is not meant for that. Them. Yet I did not. I found myself pondering whether I still held that right within me. I comforted myself with the thought that I was journeying toward healing. This was simply another scar to traverse. Perhaps it would fade away just like all the rest. However, it was devoid of the feeling of an injury. It felt as if, after what seemed like an eternity, I had at last come back to the very core of existence. What follows next? Once more, I find myself enveloped by the stillness of quiet rooms, cool crisp linens, a home filled with creations made in the company of those I am not allowed to desire. I comforted myself with the thought that I was journeying toward healing. Yet this might be an entirely different kind of injury. Suddenly, the last day had come. No plan exists. Currently, there are no updates to convey. Stepping onto the porch barefoot, I cradled a mug that had long since lost its warmth, my gaze following two trucks as they pulled away from the gravel driveway. James held back the impulse to wave. Mason did not look back. They set off, each choosing a distinct route that led them into the horizon. There I stood, bare feet resting on the wood we had installed together, my heart caught in a delicate dance between my ribs, as if it were still seeking a place to call home. I gently reminded myself to cultivate a sense of gratitude. The cabin stood finished. The task has been successfully completed. However, that was not the element I found unbearable to live without. 3 weeks passed unnoticed. The silence descended once more, heavier than before. No texts available. "No, are you okay?" The rain intensified, drowning out all sound, yet the back door remained untouched, silent in its stillness. It was just me, confronted by the stark truth that I had broken something beyond my capacity to endure. I endeavored to shift my focus, created succinct compilations, drawers that are carefully arranged with precision, utilized a brush that was far too diminutive for the task of painting the back porch, intentionally extending the duration of the endeavor. Every action I took was shaped by their influence. As I drove each nail into place, the burden of their legacy pressed upon me. Every shelf I dusted held the imprints of their fingertips, a quiet reminder of their existence. And on one fateful night I shattered. I journeyed to the motel, the one distinguished by the cigarette burns etched into the sheets and the vending machine that relentlessly consumed quarters. In the parking lot I stood, a fool bathed in the dim light, headlights darkened, the engine purring gently beneath the stillness. The neon sign above me pulsed with a lively energy. A lone word remains untouched. My search was shrouded in uncertainty. Maybe specters, or perhaps a mirror of my own being that I have yet to reconcile. I made the decision to refrain from entering. Seated in the car, my fingers gripped the steering wheel with a fierce intensity, and softly murmured, "I'm sorry," to the emptiness. For the simple reason that I was not. For everything we had accomplished, for all that we had experienced, it was undeniably real. For a single night, for a fleeting breath, for that which resides in the realm of the in-between. The next morning I set off from town. Journeyed to the north. I spent several days at a friend's home. I endeavored to lift the weight of two stairs that had once seen me as more than just a collection of remnants. Yet, forgetting proves to be a fleeting endeavor, when what was amiss resonated so deeply with the essence of home. As I stepped back into my home, a note awaited me on the porch, its presence both intriguing and unexpected. A simple, crumpled piece of paper lying beneath a stone. Untitled. No envelope exists. Handwriting that felt all too familiar, one I recognized instantly. Our departure was not born from longing. We left to alleviate any additional suffering you might endure. Yet, if you ever wish for us to be there, I genuinely long for us. You are familiar with our whereabouts. No signature was included. There is no necessity for one. As I read it, my knees gave way beneath me. Right there on the wood we carefully stained together. I stifled the tears that threatened to spill. The paper lay gently in my lap, while the sun rose with a leisurely elegance. I have yet to pay them a visit. Not at this time. Nevertheless, I have not cast aside the note either. It lies tucked away in the drawer next to my bed. In the soft beam of a flashlight, an old receipt emerges, a relic whose preservation eludes my memory. There are moments when I take it away. Amidst the quietude of the night, as the cabin creaks with an eerie resonance, I continue to occupy one side of the bed, a lingering remnant of routine. I dedicated some time to immerse myself in it, and I remember the inescapable reality. Questions linger in my mind regarding the morality of our choices. Nonetheless, I contend that certain aspects were not wholly misdirected. It was not a mistake, a moment that slipped away like sand through fingers. One I will carry in my veins far longer than I will recall the names of most others. I find myself pondering a call, just a single time, merely to hear a voice that echoes with anything but goodbye. Yet I do not